I should have known something was off when Mom texted, "Come home, Naomi. Just dinner, nothing serious." I hadn't been back in over 3 years. Not since the last passive-aggressive holiday, where Kellen drank too much wine and Delia faked an anxiety attack to avoid washing dishes. I had built a life away from that chaos. But still, when Mom said, "We miss you," I let hope crack open my chest like it always does. I showed up with a bottle of wine, not the expensive one, just decent enough to say, "I tried." Mom greeted me with a stiff hug. Dad barely looked up from the news. Kellen and Delia were already seated, side by side like the golden twins they'd always been. The lasagna was still warm. Garlic bread, too. Mom always made too much, hoping food would patch over everything she refused to talk about. We made small talk. Work, weather, Kellen's new car. Delia's latest attempt at becoming a life coach. Then Kellen leaned forward. His smile was too sharp, too clean. "Just so we're clear," he said, voice smug. "Everything goes to us." The air dropped 10 degrees. My fork froze mid-air. "Excuse me?" I asked. Even though I'd heard him perfectly, Delia chimed in, twirling her hair. "The house. The lake cottage. Everything." Mom and Dad finalized their will. My heart thudded. I turned to Mom. Her smile was gone. "It's true," she said flatly. "We thought it was better if you heard it directly from us." "Why?" I managed. Dad cleared his throat but didn't meet my eyes. "You're successful, Naomi. We're proud of you. But Kellen and Delia, they need support." Support? I'd been paying their mortgage for 4 years. Delia's wellness retreats? Funded by me. Kellen's 4th college major? Paid for. And the lake house they were so casually giving away? I'd spent $30,000 renovating it just last summer. "So this is my reward?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Don't make this about money," Mom snapped. "You always do this." My jaw tightened. I looked at them, really looked. The people who smiled in family photos, while I held everything together behind the scenes. The people who said family sticks together while they let me bleed for them. "It's always been about family for me," I said quietly. "But you made it about taking." "And I let you," Kellen scoffed. "No one forced you to help. You just liked being the martyr," Delia added. "Maybe you thought buying us would make Mom and Dad love you more." Her words sliced deeper than any insult. But the worst part? Mom and Dad stayed silent. I pushed back my chair. The sound scraped like nails against glass. "You're right," I said. "No one forced me. But starting today, no one gets to guilt me either." I stood. I didn't even finish my lasagna. "Naomi," Dad said, finally looking at me. "Don't be dramatic." "No," I said. "I'm done being convenient." And with that, I walked out of the house I helped pay for, past the family who never really saw me. The night air hit my face like a slap. Cold. Sharp. Real. I got in my car, hands trembling. For the first time in my life, I wasn't sad about being the outsider. I was finally free. The following days were hell. Calls, messages, guilt trips disguised as concern. First from Mom, then Eli, then of all people Maya. The girl who once borrowed $3,000 from me to find herself in Bali was now texting me paragraphs about how family isn't perfect, but it's still family. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Each time my phone lit up, my stomach clenched. My heart raced like I'd just sprinted across glass. I'd stare at their names on the screen, willing myself to respond, but the words never came. I didn't know how to speak to people who looked me in the eye and told me I didn't matter. I kept replaying the dinner over and over, their smirks, my mother's cold indifference, my father's silence. The way they made it sound like I was lucky to be excluded because I had enough, because I didn't need love, or fairness, or a family. I wasn't just angry, I was humiliated. For years, I gave everything I had financially, emotionally, mentally. Late-night transfers when Eli forgot to pay rent, covering Maya's cosmetic courses, paying off credit card bills that weren't mine, renovating that goddamn lake house. My fingerprints were on everything they owned, and now I was disposable, cast aside like a hired hand that had finished the job. But the worst part wasn't their betrayal. It was me, the shame of having let it happen, of having believed naively, stupidly that love could be earned, that if I worked hard enough, gave enough, bent far enough, they'd see me. But they didn't, and they never would. 3 weeks passed. I tried to stay busy long hours at work, solo gym sessions, overscheduling myself just to stay ahead of the memories. But the silence from my family was louder than ever. It wrapped around me like fog. Then came the group text. Family meeting. Sunday. You will be there, Naomi. No greeting, no explanation, just expectation. Like nothing had happened. I nearly laughed, but a small, stupid part of me still hoped. Maybe they realized they were wrong. Maybe this was an apology. So, I replied with a single word, fine. I drove to the old house in silence. The closer I got, the heavier it felt. My stomach knotted with every streetlight. The driveway was full Dad's old pickup, Eli's new Tesla, Maya's cherry red Beetle with a cracked side mirror. I paid to fix twice. I stepped out, heart thumping, and climbed the porch stairs I helped rebuild last spring. Mom opened the door. She gave me that tight, forced smile she wore at funerals. Naomi, she said, stepping aside like she was granting me a favor. Glad you decided to come. Did I have a choice? She ignored that. Inside, the tension hit like a brick wall. The living room looked the same beige walls, same fraying couch, but something had shifted. I didn't belong here anymore. I felt like an intruder. Eli was lounging, scrolling on his phone. Maya was curled up on the love seat, painting her nails. Dad stood in the corner like a statue. Then I saw her, Aunt Elise. She sat by the fireplace, quiet, watchful. The only person in that room who ever treated me like I mattered. Naomi, she said, softly, giving me a nod. I sat across from her, gripping the armrest so hard my knuckles went white. Dad cleared his throat. We called this meeting because things have gotten out of hand. You're acting irrationally. Irrationally? My voice came out sharper than I meant. Mom jumped in. You've always been dramatic, Naomi. You're acting like a victim, when all we did was make a decision that made sense. You mean giving everything to the twins and cutting me out? She rolled her eyes. It's not about the money. You just took it personally. I spent 4 years paying your mortgage. And you did that because you wanted to, she snapped. Nobody forced you. Eli leaned back with a smug grin. Naomi, you always played the martyr. We didn't ask you to throw money around. Maya didn't even look up. Maybe if you weren't so obsessed with proving yourself, they wouldn't have felt the need to reward us for being emotionally available. That one cut deep. Emotionally available? Eli disappeared for 2 years after college. Maya moved back home because she didn't like living with rules. Meanwhile, I worked, paid bills, showed up, and now I was being punished for it. I stood, fists clenched. You're right. I made a mistake, Mom smirked. Finally, some self-awareness. No, I said. The mistake was thinking I mattered here. I won't make that mistake again. I turned to leave. Dad's voice rang out. You walk out now. Don't expect to come back. I paused at the door, hand on the knob. I've never been welcome here. I just didn't want to believe it. Back home, the air felt different, lighter. Until the next morning, my door wouldn't open. I stood in front of it, bags in hand, staring at the thick, hardened, expanding foam that had been sprayed into the frame, sealing it shut like a tomb. I froze. Then rage bloomed. It had to be Eli, or Maya. Who else would stoop this low? After 3 hours and an emergency locksmith, I finally stepped into my apartment, violated, exhausted, shaking. But I had security cams. I pulled up the footage, and there he was, Eli, hoodie pulled over his head, grinning like a child caught mid-prank, foam gun in hand, spraying it into every crevice. It was methodical, deliberate. I stared at the screen in disbelief. This wasn't just petty. This was criminal. I sat there for hours, watching the footage on a loop. Then I called the one person I still trusted. Aunt Elise? My voice broke. I need your advice. The next day, I filed a police report. Eli was served a warning. Charges would follow unless he paid for the damages. And suddenly, the silence ended. Voicemails flooded in. How could you? You're turning your back on your family. It was a joke. You're blowing this out of proportion. But I didn't care anymore. The following week, I received a wire transfer, $3,000, labeled Final Payment. Happy now? I stared at the screen. No apology, no remorse, just bitterness wrapped in money. Still, I smiled, not because I wanted the cash, but because for the first time I'd made them feel consequences. You'd think things would quiet down after Eli paid. They didn't. For a few days, I actually thought maybe, just maybe, they'd let it go. Let me go. But narcissists don't lose quietly. They regroup, they rewrite. And suddenly, I was no longer Naomi, the daughter who paid the mortgage, kept the lights on, renovated the damn lake house. I was Naomi, the ungrateful one, the traitor, the girl who turned her back on her family for money. I found out from Aunt Elise. It was late on a Wednesday. I'd just gotten home from work, halfway through heating up leftovers, when her name lit up my phone. "Brace yourself," she said without even saying hello. My stomach dropped. "Your mother's been talking," she continued, "telling people you've abandoned them, that they're facing eviction, that you're trying to destroy the family legacy out of spite." "What legacy?" I laughed bitterly. "The legacy of manipulation and fake marinara dinners?" She didn't laugh. "They're saying you're unstable, Naomi, that you've always been difficult, that the money made you cruel." I sank into my couch, stunned. "And people are believing them?" She hesitated. "Some are. They didn't know how much you gave. Your mom kept all that quiet. The mortgage, the tuition, the lake house, she made it sound like you barely helped. That was the breaking point. All those years, all those wire transfers, and now I was a villain in my own story. I couldn't let them write my ending, so I sat down, opened my laptop, and for the first time in my life, I told the truth, all of it. I wrote a post on Facebook, public, no passive-aggressive subtext, just the raw, ugly truth. I detailed the years of financial support, the unpaid loans, the sacrificed vacations, the secret tuition payments, the monthly bills I covered without question. I included screenshots, bank records, receipts. I didn't smear. I didn't name call. I just told my side, and then I hit post. It went viral, at least in the microcosm of extended family and old neighbors and childhood friends who always thought we were the perfect family in the beige house on Halcyon Drive. The reactions? Explosive. Half were horrified. "Naomi, I had no idea. You're a saint. I would have snapped years ago. You deserve better." The other half? "You shouldn't air dirty laundry in public. This is still your family. You're bitter. Let it go. Let it go." That phrase haunted me. Let it go, like I hadn't swallowed my pain for years, just to keep peace at that table. Let it go like I hadn't already given everything. Mom called. Voicemail. Furious. "How dare you humiliate us like this? You twisted everything." That post was malicious, disrespectful. Family doesn't do this to each other. That last part made me laugh out loud. The hypocrisy was Olympic level. Still, her words stung. So I called her back. The moment she answered, I said, "I'm only going to say this once. After all I did, you made me out to be the villain just because I finally stopped paying for your choices." Silence. Then she hissed. "We only did what we had to for Eli and Maya. They needed it more. And I didn't need anything?" My voice cracked. "Love? Fairness? A thank you? You abandoned us." "No," I said quietly. "You abandoned me. Years ago. You just made it official with the will." Click. I hung up, and that was the last time I heard her voice. At first, I felt numb. Then, free. But freedom is weird. It's not always joyful at first. Sometimes it feels like grief. I grieved the family I thought I had. The version of them I defended for years. I grieved the future I'd always hoped for: reconciliation, warmth, a wedding day where they'd show up proud. None of that was real. But what was real? The peace that came with truth. And then came the sabotage. A week after my post, I came home from work to find a voicemail from my landlord. "Naomi, we received a call from someone claiming you were subletting your apartment illegally. Said you'd turned it into an Airbnb." I nearly dropped my phone. It didn't take a genius to figure out who made the call. No one else would even think to target me like that. I explained to the landlord, showed him my lease, my untouched living space. He was understanding, but I was rattled. I started checking the locks twice, peeking through the peephole, changing passwords. The message was clear: if you stop being useful to us, you become a target. Annalise stayed by my side through all of it. She came over often, bringing coffee and warmth and the kind of comfort only people who see you can give. "They're unraveling," she said one evening. "You were the glue. Now they're falling apart." I shrugged. "Then maybe it's good I broke." She smiled sadly. "You didn't break, Naomi. You bent for years. This is you unbending." Meanwhile, the fallout hit hard. Dad picked up a second job at a warehouse. Mom was working early diner shifts. Maya posted about toxic relatives on Instagram, Between photos of free PR packages she probably begged for. Eli, still jobless, still arrogant, still blaming everyone but himself. And me? I was, okay, still healing, still catching myself wondering if I'd gone too far. But then I'd open my bank app and not see $1,800 flying out to pay someone else's mortgage. And I'd remember, I'm allowed to be okay. It was on one of those okay days that I met someone. On a hike, of all places. I joined a weekend group to distract myself, reclaim some joy. And there was Alex, tall, kind eyes, quiet but curious. We walked together for hours talking about books, weird family stories, favorite pastries. He didn't ask intrusive questions. He didn't flinch when I mentioned my family stuff. He just listened. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I had to prove my worth to someone. Alex didn't need me to be anything but myself. And that was new. By fall, I had a new routine. Work, hikes, quiet weekends with Alex, late night calls with Elise. No more tiptoeing around phone calls from Maya. No more anxious budgeting around other people's problems. It wasn't perfect. Some nights, I still cried. Sometimes I missed the idea of family so badly it physically hurt. But I never missed them. I missed who I thought they were. And then, the holidays came. That's when I learned they weren't done yet. They were planning something I didn't see coming. But the first holiday without them felt unreal. No group texts arguing about who's bringing the pie. No phone calls about gift limits we'd all ignore anyway. No last-minute demands that I cover the turkey and the ham and the wine because you make more than the rest of us. It was quiet, too quiet. Thanksgiving came and went. I spent it with Aunt Elise and a couple of friends, good food, board games, cheap wine. We laughed until our cheeks hurt. Still, I couldn't help but glance at my phone that night. No texts, no calls. Not even a guilt trip disguised as a holiday greeting. For a minute, I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe they finally moved on. I should have known better. December 10th, a Saturday. I was in the middle of decorating my tiny apartment tree, cheap ornaments from Target, a string of warm lights, a candle that promised it smelled like alpine snow. It didn't. When I heard a knock. Not the buzzer. A knock. Odd. I opened the door, and there they were. My parents. Together. Standing on my doorstep. I blinked. Thought maybe I was dreaming. Naomi, Dad said, nodding like we were strangers meeting at a networking event. Mom offered a stiff smile. We'd like to talk. Every instinct screamed no, but I stepped aside. They entered like they owned the place, eyes scanning every corner. Mom paused at my tree, her lips twitching as if she wanted to say something petty about the lack of a star. I stayed standing. So, I said, arms crossed. What is this? Mom got right to it. We want to heal the family. I almost laughed. Dad nodded solemnly. It's time to stop all this division. My voice came out colder than I intended. You mean stop telling people I'm trying to bankrupt you? That I'm unstable? Their eyes didn't flinch. Mom clasped her hands. We've both made mistakes. I raised an eyebrow. Go on. But, she continued, we thought it was time for a fresh start. The holidays are about forgiveness. My stomach turned. This wasn't an apology. This was a campaign. We're thinking of hosting Christmas this year, Dad said. Like old times. Eli and Maya will be there, Mom added quickly. Even your uncle's flying in from Florida. Big family gathering. It would mean a lot if you joined us. I stared at them. No apology, no acknowledgement, no remorse. Just a thinly veiled request to perform for their reputation. I shook my head slowly. You're not sorry. Mom blinked. Excuse me? You're not sorry, I repeated. You're just trying to reset the narrative. Make me show up so you can parade me around like everything's fine. Dad's jaw tensed. That's not fair. What's not fair is watching you lie to everyone for months, while I quietly rebuilt my life. Silence. Then Mom softened her voice. You've always been dramatic, Naomi. There it was. The gaslight special. I took a deep breath. No, I said. I'm not coming. I'm not playing this game. Mom's eyes narrowed. You'll regret that. Not as much as I'd regret going. They left in silence. No hugs, no goodbyes, just the cold clack of the door shutting behind them. I told Elise what happened. She sighed deeply. They're gearing up for something. Be careful. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, I got a call from HR. Apparently, Someone had submitted an anonymous complaint to my company, alleging financial misconduct. It was bogus, easily disproven. But for 48 hours, I sat at my desk unable to breathe, knowing exactly who'd tried to take me down. I called my lawyer. Yes, I have one now, because boundaries sometimes need teeth. She made a few calls, quietly. Nothing official came of it, but the source of the complaint was traced back to a burner email connected to Surprise Maya. I didn't sue. I didn't retaliate. I simply sent one text, "I'm not afraid of you. Try it again, and we'll handle this in court. Enjoy your Christmas." She never replied. The weeks crawled toward Christmas. The first told Alex everything. He didn't flinch, just listened. He even offered to spend the holidays with me, which made my heart ache a little in the best way. "Are you okay with Chinese food and Die Hard?" I asked, half joking. "Only if I get to bring eggnog," he smiled. Christmas Eve came, cold, quiet, safe. I cooked for myself something indulgent, buttery, full of garlic. I lit candles. I played soft jazz. I opened a gift from Aunt Elise, a journal wrapped in gold paper. A note inside that said, "Write it down. All of it. Don't let them erase you." I cried when I read it. Later that night, Alex arrived with wine and a worn-out VHS copy of Die Hard. Yes, VHS. He said it was for the vibe. We laughed. We curled up on the couch. We watched Bruce Willis say yippee-ki-yay for the millionth time. And for the first time in years, I didn't dread Christmas. But the next morning, they struck again. I woke up to 37 missed calls, texts, emails, even DMs on Instagram from family friends. Mom had posted a massive status, a long, dramatic essay about losing a daughter to selfishness, about how money changed her, about how this Christmas we pray for those who've strayed. A picture accompanied the post, an old one, me, age 10, holding Maya's hand in front of the fireplace. The caption, "Love her always, even if she's forgotten how to love back." It had over 200 comments. Most were sympathy. A few were confused. And just a few pushed back. She posted her truth. "You never addressed that. She paid your mortgage. You left her out of your will. Funny how the quiet one always ends up being the bad guy, huh?" I didn't reply, didn't engage. Instead, I reposted Aunt Elise's note. "Write it down. All of it. Don't let them erase you." And I wrote, "Some people will twist the truth to save face. I spent years paying for silence. That debt's been cleared. I'm not coming back." The next week passed in silence. No more calls. No more posts. It felt like a storm had finally burned itself out. But as always, storms have aftershocks. And what came next wasn't a smear campaign. It was something I never saw coming. A lawyer's letter. But that? The letter arrived on a rainy Thursday. No warning. No email. No phone call. Just a plain white envelope wedged into my mailbox between a pizza coupon and a credit card offer. I didn't recognize the return address, but the law firm's logo on the upper left sent a chill through my spine. Wallace, Kent, and Darrow LLP. I stood there for a full minute, water dripping down my coat, staring at that envelope like it might explode. Then I ripped it open with a single swipe of my key. It wasn't a threat, not directly. It was an invitation to the reading of my parents' living trust. Apparently, they had finalized some post-restructuring amendments to their estate plan and wanted to offer closure to all involved parties. Closure, right. The meeting was scheduled for the following Monday at 10 a.m. sharp, in the firm's downtown office. I sat on the edge of my bed, letter in hand, letting the weight of it press into my chest. This wasn't about money. Not anymore. They'd already taken care of that, leaving everything to Eli and Maya, leaving me out of the will like a forgotten footnote. No, this wasn't generosity. It was bait. And for reasons I couldn't fully explain, not even to myself, I took it. Monday came like a dare I didn't want to take. I wore a black blazer, no jewelry, no makeup, armor, not aesthetics. When I entered the conference room, I found a row of leather chairs, a long walnut table, and a stack of thick manila folders. My parents were there, so were Eli and Maya. None of them looked at me. I didn't look at them, either. The attorney, a gray-haired man with 2 white teeth, smiled like this was some charming family gathering. "Miss Naomi Wynn," he said, nodding toward me. "Thank you for coming. We'll begin shortly." He started with formalities, legal jargon, dates, witnesses, blah blah. I tuned out until he reached for a small, locked wooden box on the table. He clicked it open and pulled out an envelope. "This," he said, "was written personally by Mr. and Mrs. Wynne. It contains a revised codicil and a personal message for each beneficiary." My stomach turned. He passed the first to Maya, then Eli, then me. Theirs were sealed with wax stamps. Mine, just a plain, folded piece of paper. No seal, no warmth, just my name in my mother's handwriting. My hands trembled slightly as I unfolded it. I read, "Naomi, we don't expect you to forgive us, nor are we asking for it. We simply want you to understand that everything we did, however it may have felt, was for the greater good of the family. You've always been strong, too strong for your own good, perhaps, and that strength, while admirable, made you hard to reach. We knew you would never need what we left behind, but your siblings, they do. This doesn't mean we don't love you. It means we trusted you to build something better. If you're reading this, then you've outgrown the safety net we gave everyone else. And that's a legacy, too. Mom and Dad, I read it twice. Once for content, twice for cruelty." Eli was smirking. Maya flipped her letter shut dramatically, as if she'd just won a game show. I folded mine silently, placed it in my purse, and stood up. "That's it?" I asked the attorney. He glanced at his file. "Actually, there's one more item. A separate envelope marked for your attention only, from your grandmother." My heart stopped. "From Grandma Wynne?" "She left instructions for it to be held in trust until all estate matters were resolved." He handed it to me, a navy blue envelope, with a cursive script that made my throat tighten. I sat back down. Hands trembling, I tore it open. Inside was a letter. "My dearest Naomi, I always worried they'd do this to you. That you'd give and give and give until there was nothing left, and they'd still ask for more. I want you to know, I saw everything. I saw how you paid their bills, how you skipped vacations, how you stayed up late working just to keep them afloat. And I saw how they dismissed you when you asked for basic respect. So I did something about it. Years ago, I put aside something just for you, something they couldn't touch. Ask Elise about the red lockbox. It's yours, everything in it. With love, Grandma Wynne." The room around me blurred. Noise faded. My breath caught. I hadn't heard Grandma Wynne's name in years, not since the quiet funeral where my parents had barely let me speak. But now, somehow, from beyond the grave, she was speaking louder than any of them. I stood up again. This time, I didn't ask for permission. "I'm done here," I said. No one stopped me, not even Maya. I called Aunt Elise before I even reached my car. Her voice cracked. "I was wondering when you'd find out. You knew? I kept it in my closet for years," she said, "but I never opened it. Not once. It wasn't mine to open." 2 hours later, I was in her living room. She handed me the red lockbox, small, metal, old-fashioned, slightly rusted around the hinges. "I don't know what's inside," she said gently, "but your grandmother said it would matter someday." I held it like a relic, something ancient and powerful. When I opened it, I cried. Inside were a $50,000 cashier's check, dated 3 months before Grandma died, a handwritten journal, her words, her stories, her truth about our family, a folder of photos, most of which I'd never seen before, pictures of me as a child, me graduating college, me at work, photos I never even knew existed, a deed to a small lakeside property I'd visited with her once as a child, one she had always said she used to rent. It was never rented. She owned it. And now, so did I. That night, I sat on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by the past and the future. I read every page of her journal, every scribbled note, every confession, every anecdote about how she saw through the performative perfection of her son, my father, and his desperate need to maintain image at the cost of connection. She wrote about how I reminded her of herself, how she regretted not fighting harder when she saw them molding me into something useful instead of someone loved. By the time I reached the last page, I was sobbing, but not from grief, from relief. That weekend, I drove to the lakeside cabin. It was old, humble, perfect. Inside, the furniture was covered in sheets. Dust clung to the window panes. But the view? Breathtaking. The lake shimmered beneath a curtain of pine trees, untouched by time or drama or inheritance wars. I stood on the porch and breathed in a peace I hadn't known in years, maybe not ever, and I whispered to the sky, "Thank you." In the weeks that followed, I began transferring utilities, getting the deed updated, filing ownership documents. Legally, officially, this was mine. A piece of history, a foundation for something new. Back in the city, I received one last message from Maya. Just one word. Congrats. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. It's been 6 months since I opened that red lockbox. 6 months since I reclaimed not just my money, but my voice, my life. And the truth? I've never been more at peace. The cabin by the lake is no longer just a retreat. It's home. I come here every month now, sometimes alone, sometimes with close friends, sometimes just with a pen and journal. The stillness heals me in ways therapy never could. This land, this air, it was my grandmother's final gift, and now it's the soil where I plant the rest of my life. I planted lavender along the front porch, bought a second-hand canoe, learned how to split wood. I sleep better. I breathe deeper. I wake up and don't feel that crushing ache in my chest anymore. It's funny. All that pain I carried for years, all that guilt, the twisted sense of obligation, the constant need to prove I was worthy of love, gone. Not instantly, but steadily. And it started with a single decision: to walk away. My family? They're still spinning. Elijah has burned through most of what was left to him. 3 failed business ventures in a year. Still calling himself an entrepreneur, like the title makes up for the bankruptcy notices. Maya posts photos of fancy lattes and designer bags, pretending the inheritance hasn't run dry. I've heard from extended relatives that she's moved back in with my parents, the same people who once said she just needed more time to grow. And my parents? Still bitter, still blaming, still trying to rewrite the story where they're the heroes, and I'm the ungrateful traitor. But I don't answer their calls anymore. Their emails go unread, because I don't owe them a damn thing. Sometimes people ask if I regret it, if I ever miss the connection, and I answer honestly, I miss the version of them. I wished they were, but I don't miss the version I got. There's a difference. I've started something new now, a small nonprofit, inspired by my grandmother's journals. It supports young women who have been financially exploited by their families. Quiet abuse, overlooked trauma, the kind that leaves no bruises, only emptiness. We call it Red Lockbox, because sometimes all it takes is one locked box, one buried truth, to set someone free. The past will always be there, like a scar across my timeline. But it no longer controls me. It doesn't define me. I do. And I'm proud of that. Proud of the woman who finally chose herself, who stopped waiting for applause that would never come, who walked out of the fire without asking for permission, and built a life where the flames couldn't touch her anymore. My name is Naomi Wynn, and this is not the end of my story. It's the beginning of everything.